Good afternoon. My name is Tim Ryan. Welcome to the Tim and Jennifer show. This is Amazing Life.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Jimenez Ryan.
Actually, it's a Tim and Jen show. I said Tim and Jennifer show.
Ooh, no, the Tim and Jen
Tim
show.
and Jen show. But anyhow,
wait,
that's my badass wife.
Thank you.
You're
so
gorgeous.
Sweet.
I gotta be.
Ooh.
I got a guy in here that kicked my ass.
Yeah, I know.
If I'm not nice to you.
I'm like super excited to have our next guest on because he's just awesome and a badass, and you love him so much, and I love him so much, and he's like legendary.
Yeah, he is a legend. He's actually become a really dear friend of mine, and we'll get into that. But our next guest is somebody I grew up as a young child watching on television, and tens of millions of people have watched him through their households for 30 fucking years, if not longer. I could get into this. This gentleman is an American entrepreneur, television producer, professional wrestling booker, podcast host, on-screen personality. He's best known for serving as executive producer and later president of World Championship Wrestling. Let's just get into it. Aaron Bischoff. Whatever this shit. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Jen. And by the way, after that big build-up and hearing how long you've been watching me on television and how many years people have been watching, you gotta go old people have to get to bed early. You know that.
Wise people. I mean, Eric, you've done it all, but I'm not going to start there because through our journeys and our talks, you had an interesting
You're a hustler.
Life.
You've always been a hustler.
Prior to getting into everything you were in, I mean, amateur, boxer, kickboxer, martial artist,
veterinarian assistant, right?
Construction.
Worked at meat
packing plant.
Yeah.
I don't know. Eric.
Wait.
What the hell did you do, man?
Wait.
What?
I couldn't hold a job.
That's okay.
You were a hustler way back in the day. I mean, even before you started doing wrestling, and then you've evolved in all the other hats. But I do gotta tell you this. So as a little girl, I used to watch you, and I'd be like, I wanted to be a wrestler, and I believed it was real. I fought everyone that, like, you know, and they would say it's fake. I'm like, no, it's not, you know. And then I found out it's not real, but it's scripted. It's scripted, but the physical aspect of it is real. And it was my first, not a boy, but all boys that wrestle.
We'll get into that.
Like you in your profession.
So Minnesota, that's where you were originally from, Eric?
No, actually I was born and raised until my early teens in Detroit. And then
Detroit.
My father got a job opportunity in Pittsburgh. So when I was about 13, I think, we moved to Pittsburgh for a few years and then lived there for a few more years. And then eventually when I was about, 15, 16, moved to Minnesota. And I lived in Minnesota for, 20 some odd years.
So you went from Detroit, which wasn't you were a tough kid if you were coming out of the Detroit area. And then going to Pittsburgh, you come out of Pittsburgh, you're a tough kid. What was it like jumping, different high schools, trying to meet new kids? Were you a fighter in high school? Were you a lover? Did you do your own deal? What was it like for you?
Well, growing up in Detroit, and it's funny, I was just talking to someone today, a separate business call, who lives about a mile or less from where I grew up. And he's quite a bit younger than I was. I'm actually his father's age. But we were talking about, what the neighborhood was like when I used to live there. And, I got in a fight on the way to school. Usually one during the course of the day when someone wants to take lunch money, and then typically one on the way home from school. So getting into a fight, as a young kid was a daily occurrence. And I didn't know any better. I just thought that's the way everybody lived. It was just what you did. It was part of growing up. And I didn't really think much of it. I wasn't really good at it. I usually got my ass kicked on a pretty regular basis when I was young. but again, it's just, it didn't, you know, I don't look back at it as a bad memory because it was just what you did. And the same thing kind of when I got to Pittsburgh, it was kind of the similar environment, you know, and one day I remember shortly after getting to Pittsburgh, I think my second or third day at school, I'll never forget, I was riding on a bus. I had never ridden on a bus in Detroit because I could walk to school, but where we lived in Pittsburgh, I couldn't. So I was on a bus and this kid was sitting behind me on the way home. His name was Kenny Stockline. Kenny, if you're out there, it was a pleasure. But Kenny was the jock, you know, he was like the quarterback of the football on the football team. And he was just, he was the shit. Right. And Kenny was sitting behind me. I was sitting by myself. Nobody knew who I was. I was a new kid. And I guess Kenny had made this garden trowel out of sheet metal in shop class. So all the way home from school, he's binging me on the back of the head, just bing, and everybody would laugh. They thought that was funny. Bing, everybody would laugh. It just went on, you know, for like 40 minutes on the bus until we got to our stop. And then as soon as we got to our stop, and I could see he was standing behind me. I was looking at his feet. I turned around and just blasted him right in the chin. and I didn't knock him out, but I knocked him down. And of course, everybody pulled it apart. I got thrown off the bus. I couldn't ride the bus anymore for like 3 months.
Oh no.
Yeah, that was a big hit in my family's home. But you know, of course, he called me out the next day. And all the next day, I'm in school, and everybody's talking about how the new kid's going to get his ass kicked. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm used to this 3 times a day. This once a week thing is no big deal. I don't know what you're all excited about. And anyway, we got off the bus, and there was probably 15 or 20 kids around wanting to watch a big fight. And I just beat the piss out of him. And I thought, man, these Pittsburgh guys don't really know how to fight. they think they do, but they don't, because I was no good in Detroit, but I kind of walked the walk in this town. So, and here's the best part. I never got into another fight in Pittsburgh after that.
You set the stage. It's like, my mentality, walking into prison, you clock the first guy, chances are they're not going to bother you anymore. You know, that's just
it was the same thing. And after that, you know, I lived there for a couple of years, and I had a ball in Pittsburgh. It was a lot more fun for me as a kid growing up. There was more things to do, and I had some really great friends and a mentor that lived across the street from me. So it was a very positive thing for me. We moved to Minneapolis, another job opportunity for my father, and it was a very easy transition. You know, Minnesota is a much more civilized environment than Detroit or Pittsburgh. So there were no fights involved, and I didn't have to prove myself to anybody, and pretty much got along.
So what were some of the careers that you did in Minnesota, Eric? Let's talk about a couple of those.
Well, you know, I joke. It's not almost not a joke. But my goal at one point was to have a job that started with every letter of the alphabet. and I was making very good progress all the way through high school. You know, I've always worked. I had my first job when I was like 7 or 8, picking up garbage out in front of a convenience store. There's an Italian couple in Detroit owned a place called Lucy's. And I would walk over there and at the end of the day, you know, before dark, and I would pick up all the, you know, garbage and trash and pop bottle caps and all the crap laying around. And then I got to go in, and my pay every day was Lucy would open up the cash register, and I got to go in with one hand and reach for as many coins as I could grab. Didn't matter if it was quarters, nickels, dimes, didn't matter. There was no rules, just not paper money. And I would reach in, and whatever I could walk out with in my hand was my pay for the day. And I just loved that. I thought
that's cool.
Really cool.
That's very, you know, and it's the things like that you remember. A dear friend of our family's, Dickie Tronzel, unfortunately passed away this morning due to some COVID, but had cancer and all this. But I worked at his bar at 9 years old, humping up all the beer on the weekends and the ice. And I can remember like yesterday, I got $2. I got a pack of Double Mint gum, I got a Hershey bar, and all the soda pop I can drink. And he made it so fun. Those memories will be instilled in, but I learned work ethic then. And then I ran his pizza restaurants. But anyhow, so on. That's all the quarters. You got a better deal than I did.
No, I don't think so, brother. I
I
had
don't know.
little hands. I couldn't hold that many quarters.
I was just going to say, like, how long did you have that job? Like, did you start getting more and more money as you started growing up?
Well, then actually what they did, Lucy and her husband, I can't remember her husband's name, but Lucy, they kind of promoted me. And then, after a year or two of that, I think, and I was, I got a little bigger and a little stronger as I got a little older. Then they let me work in the back. Now, this is back when if you bought, soft drinks that came in a bottle, you could return those bottles for 2 cents or 5 cents or whatever they were worth at the time. So people would return the bottles, and my job then was stacking. Like, I had to make sure all the Coke bottles were in Coke cases and all the Pepsi bottles were in Pepsi cases, and all the way down the line. And then I'd stack all those cases back in what was essentially a garage called the warehouse. But I did that, and then I had a paper route at the same time. I delivered papers by hand. And what else did I do in Detroit? I sold Christmas trees and pool tables. Guy had a big store that, in the summer, all year round, he sold pool tables and outdoor pools in summertime, obviously, but he sold Christmas trees during the Christmas season. So I went up one day when I was about 12 and said, "Hey, clean up, need any help around here?" And he said, "Sure, why don't you sell Christmas trees?" I sold the hell of Christmas trees. And then he gave me a job kind of, working inside and helping him sell pool tables and set up pool tables and things like that. I've had a million jobs.
That's awesome. So you're up in Minneapolis area, you're doing odd jobs. What was was it in Minneapolis, or when you moved to Chicago with Lori, what was the transition that you ended up stumbling into World Wrestling Entertainment or World Wrestling Federation, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, well, it was a little, when at the time Lori and I moved to Chicago, she was modeling full-time. I was dabbling. I was doing okay, but there wasn't a lot of work for men in Minneapolis, but I was doing all right. But we found an agent, or an agent found us, I should say, and an agent came to Chicago looking for talent to move to Chicago, because Chicago had Sears and Ward's and JCPenney's and all the big catalogs. A lot of them back then were in Chicago. Yeah. So it wasn't as powerful of a market as New York and to a degree LA, but Chicago was a great way to stay busy for a catalog model, which is what I was. And so we moved to Chicago together to do that. And, I did okay. Lori did okay. We had to supplement our income. She was a cocktail waitress at a place called BBC. I don't know if you remember BBC.
I don't.
Down on Division Street, I believe. Yeah, it was down on Division. And I was a bouncer I bounced at Mother's.
Everyone's worked at Mother's.
Yeah, I bounced there. I bounced at a place called PS Chicago. I don't know if you remember PS Chicago.
I'll be damned. That
place was fun. And I bartended at Don's Fish Market over on Rush Street. So if any of those sound familiar to you, I left a fair amount of sweat and DNA inside.
Boy, you were in the thick of. And now, was this in the 80s?
Yeah, it was in the early 80s, so It was nothing but a party, brother. You know that.
Oh, absolutely. That's my hometown and my backyard, and many nights on Rush Street and Division and wondering.
Yeah, 80s Chicago working in a nightclub was interesting.
Yeah, I bet. So what happened? What was the catalyst then? Because weren't you brought in to do some radio, or how did you end up getting into what became your career?
Well, it's a really bizarre and circuitous story, so I'll just kind of try to get to the point. But Lori and I moved. We decided, living in Chicago, while it was fun and we were doing okay, it wasn't. By this time we're in our mid-20s, so it's not like or at least I was. Lori was in her early 20s. I was actually in my late 20s. Lori was in her early 20s. And we said, this is not, are we going to be here 5 years from now doing the same thing? And that was my concern. You know how it can be when you work in the nightclub business.
Yep.
You make a lot of money. You have an extraordinary amount of fun. And if you're not careful, by the time, it's great when you're in your early 20s, but by the time you're in your 30s and your 40s, not so much.
You're stuck, yeah.
So we said, let's, forget about it. Let's move back. And shortly after we moved back to Minneapolis, Lori got pregnant with our son, Garrett. And then I got a job selling agricultural equipment. I sold potato harvesters. I was a regional sales manager for a company that sold potato harvesters.
And the letter P.
Letter P, potato harvesters. There you go.
And we lived in this little tiny town. I think there was 500 people in this town in north central Minnesota. It was the most, oh God, I can't even describe it. It's just, I would say, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, I worked in a small factory, I worked in the office, but the guys in the factory that actually built this equipment, there was probably 40 of them, maybe 50. I would say half of them had never even been to the city of Minneapolis.
That's scary.
Which was 75 or 80 miles away, maybe a little more, 90 miles away. I mean, that's how isolated and small this town was.
And if you haven't traveled the country or been to northern Wisconsin or Minnesota, you have no idea. I mean, it's
another world.
It's another world. It really is. Everybody knows everyone, and yeah, they don't transition 10 miles away.
Did you ever see the show Fargo when it first came out?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. That was a big town compared to where we lived in Bram. But
how'd you talk your wife into moving there?
Oh, she was in love. Come on, look at this face.
Hey, look, I'm gonna be the top potato harvester machine seller in the country.
No, she just wanted to make sure we could pay the phone bill.
Yeah,
that's all she cared about.
Yeah.
But we did that for a little while, and then it occurred, and by the way, we kind of skipped over a big part of my life. It's not that important to talk about, but I was involved heavily in martial arts, kickboxing for a long time. And I got my black belt. I was an instructor. I fought on the amateur circuit for a couple of years. I actually had a couple pro fights and realized that there was no money in that either, really, back then especially. But during that period of time, I made a good friend, still my close friends to this day. His name is Sonny Ono. Sonny's Japanese. He was born in Tokyo. He's a little bit older than I am, a couple months. And one night after a tournament that we both competed in, we were sitting around a tavern consuming adult beverages. And I asked Sonny, I said, Sonny, I grew up in Detroit. He grew up in Tokyo. We had a similar family type, economic situation, very much lower middle class. I said, Sonny, what did you used to do as a kid when you were in school, when you were little? And Sonny told me they used to run around and they would pick up milk bottle caps. So evidently in Tokyo, back in the 50s or 60s, I guess, this would have been, when you got milk, you had a little kind of brass colored cap on it. You popped it off and drank the milk. And people would sometimes discard these caps, which is unusual because Japanese are very fastidious about litter. Yes. But nonetheless, these kids would go around and they pick up these milk bottle caps and they throw them at each other like shuriken stars, ninja stars, right? And that's how they play tag. Well, as a kid growing up in Detroit, me and my buddies, we had rock fights. We'd throw rocks at each other. We played Army, and that's what we did. So fast forward about 7 hours and copious amounts of adult beverages, and we had sketched out this game called Ninja Star Wars. And in this game, you got two felt vests, black felt vests, and they had a ninja character silk screened on the front. And this is back with Karate Kid, the original one.
Sure. Yeah.
You get a little headband with this little thin plastic eye protection on it. And then you got 3 red stars and 3 white stars. And they were big Velcro stars that were weighted down with a little washer in the middle so you could throw them across the room. And like, Tim, you and I were playing it. I had the white stars and you had the red. The first person, like if I got 3 red stars stuck to your felt vest first, I won. If you got 3 white ones stuck on me, you won.
I win.
So we designed this game, and I've got a very interesting Chicago story that I'm going to come back to you with in just a few minutes on. But we designed this game, had about 5,000 of them manufactured, begged, borrowed, stole, printed, bounced checks, did whatever we had to do, because you couldn't make like 100 games. You had to make like 5,000 of them.
Right.
Otherwise, it would have cost $300 a piece, right? So we ordered all these games, got them all shipped over, and then we went, oh, shit. Now what do we do? How are we going to sell these things? So there was a regional wrestling promoter. He was a big-time wrestling promoter in Minneapolis. His name was Vern Gagne. And Vern ran a wrestling company that not only had a show in syndication throughout the upper Midwest, he was big in Chicago, by the way, But he also had a show on ESPN Monday through Friday. So I said, you know what? He was a big supporter of amateur wrestling. I wrestled in high school and college, and I wrestled in the AAU freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling teams when I was young and in shape. So I said, you know, he loved amateur wrestling. So I figured I'm going to call him. I'm going to call Vern, and I'm going to play the amateur wrestling card and see if I can get a meeting. And it worked. So I took this silly ass game to his office, got all of his employees around this big table, put vests on them, and they're all throwing stars at each other, having a great time. And Vern looked at me and he said, God, kid, this is great. You know, well, let's do this. And about a month later, he offered to hire me to do sales and syndication and corporate sponsorship development and things like that for the AWA, or the the American Wrestling Association. And that's how I got into wrestling.
Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing. From the Ninja Stars.
So what happened to this? What happened to those games?
Well, we sold a bunch of them. I don't made our money back, but we didn't suffer as badly as we thought we were going to, but it worked okay. But actually you can still find them. I found somebody sent me a link. There's somebody actually they've ripped the idea off and they're actually selling them today. You can order them online.
Wow.
I'll be damned. It would be amazing if you could actually find one of your original ones out on the internet somewhere. You probably can't.
I'm sure I've got some neighbors that used to live in South Minneapolis, where Lori and I lived at the time, that I probably conned into letting me stuff them in their garage because we ran out of room in our 800 square foot bungalow. So they're probably out there hidden in garages all over South Minneapolis.
So how long did the amateur wrestling go before you transitioned over to Vince McMahon and his?
Well, and Vince came much later on. I worked for the AWA, and it was professional wrestling. It was just a different company back then. And Vern and the AWA they had fallen on hard times and were really struggling, to the point where I went probably 4 to 6 months without a paycheck. I was very loyal to Vern. I liked the work, and I was very loyal. But, you know, I got my cars were being repossessed out of my driveway. We lived in Minnesota.
How do you explain that to the wife, Aaron? Yeah. You know?
Well, she knew what was going on. There was no explanation necessary. It was pretty obvious. There was no secrets at the time. But, you know, we fell behind in our mortgage payments, and they were foreclosing on the house. It was in winter in Minnesota. We heated our house with propane. We couldn't even afford the propane tank, so I had to go bounce a check for a bunch of little portable kerosene heaters to keep the house warm. Our kids were really young. I was feeding them rice and beans and shit. So I finally went to Vern and said, Vern, I just can't, you know, I love you, and I'll keep working for you as long as I can, but I'm running out of rope. And I said, you know, there's a rumor that there's a company down in Georgia, Ted Turner's company, that's looking to hire an announcer. I meant to put my name in a hat. He gave me his blessing and wished me luck, and I did. And I actually got the job and went to work for Ted Turner's company in 1991. Worked in WCW from 91 till about 2000. Took a year or two off, and then was hired by Vince McMahon of the WWE as an on-camera talent.
So it was WCW first.
Yeah.
And WCW ultimately had some big name wrestlers. I mean, you guys built a hell of what's the eye roll? No big name wrestlers?
No, well, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Roddy Piper, Ric Flair, Bill Goldberg.
Yeah.
We had a couple people that people knew.
Yeah.
What was that like for you, though, starting in 91, like in having
to go to work for Ted Turner? Now, when he had started Turner Broadcasting Network, that was some early 80s, right? I mean, he was just starting CNN and all that other crap. And
yeah, I don't remember the timeline, but Ted Turner inherited a billboard company from his father.
Okay.
His father had a billboard company down in Macon, Georgia, but he had billboards all over Atlanta, and Ted inherited that after his father died. But Ted's vision was to create a superstation. Ted was an amazing visionary, and he created this superstation. He didn't have any programming to put on it. He had the Atlanta Braves, and then a bunch of reruns of Andy Mayberry and Gomer Pyle and all kinds of silliness.
Sure.
But Ted knew that, wrestling worked and wrestling attracted an audience. It always has. It's always been one of the most popular forms of entertainment on television. People don't realize it, but professional wrestling has probably been more successful on television since the beginning of television time than any other genre other than news.
I would absolutely agree.
100%.
When we're going back in times to where, we had cartoons on Saturday morning. That was it. You didn't have cartoon channels and all that, but you always get some form of either local, regional wrestling on television. Yep. And you grew up watching these things, and, the Junkyard Dog and Andre the Giant, and even before them. And I feel like my generation grew up watching wrestling expand to what it's become. And what was I doing the other day? There was a clip of The Rock. Now I'm going back 15 years. My buddy Jared, who's my daughter's godfather, we're both recruiters. We would call each other every Monday night. Can you smell what The Rock's cooking? And play these.
So we had a really long work day. So he's in the room and I come in and I'm doing something and I'm about to call my mom or something. And I could tell he was really stressed that day working. And all of a sudden I see this, can you, whatever it is. And I look up and I'm like, oh my God, he's his 8-year-old self right there. And I kind of started giggling. I walked out of the room.
And watching Hulk Hogan and the yellow t-shirts, and your role in all this was what? Starting out with WCW.
Well, starting out, I was an on-camera talent. I was what I would refer to as a backup to a backup to a backup of all the other announcers who were too busy to do a lot. So I got a lot. I batted cleanup as an announcer. I did voiceover work. I did a lot of the international shows I would host, for example. Some of the smaller, less significant shows that Turner had, I would host occasionally. I would do play-by-play for some of the shows. That's how I started. And then a few years after that, I became an executive producer. I kind of oversaw all of the television. At that time, Turner was producing probably 7 hours of programming a week, 52 weeks a year. So I was the executive producer of about 350 hours of television a year. It's kind of big. That's a lot of TV.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Go from being a backup to a backup to a backup to an executive producer so quickly.
You hit it right on the head, Jennifer, early on. I was a hustler. I've never been satisfied with the status quo. I get bored really easily. And that's not a good thing, by the way. I've had to, and I'm still to this day disciplining myself to not do as much as I want to do, but do well the things that I have an opportunity to do. Mm-hmm. And that's a big challenge for me because my nature is, I see something over there, I want it, I'm going to go get that, no matter what it is. If it's an opportunity, I want to seize it and exploit it. But I was very aggressive. I was talented enough, I guess, at what I needed to be. I put my name in the hat. I interviewed for the job with a lot of other executive producers from around the country, people that came from other forms of entertainment. And for whatever reason, Turner felt that I had whatever it took, or whatever he was looking for, I guess is a better way to say it. And I got the job. From there, I went from executive producer, I became the vice president, then the senior vice president, then the executive vice president, and eventually became the president of the company. And I took this company that Turner owned. When I took it over, it was a $25 million a year company that was losing about $10 million a year in the process. By the time I left, it was a $350 million a year company. And this is over the course of about 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
$350 million a year company that was spinning off about 50 to 60 million in profit.
That's a big fucking deal.
Not only were you talented, you were smart, very smart. I mean, people can work their whole careers to try to be an executive producer and they don't even get there to where you got, and so quickly. And you also got a lot of fame at the same time. All this stuff is happening. How did you learn? How did you deal with all that?
Not very well, not as bad as some people. Headlines are in front of us every day.
Yeah.
Whether it's a politician or an actor or an athlete, member of the clergy, it doesn't really matter. You know, people screw up on a regular basis. I avoided some of that, maybe most of that, but it took its toll. I never got a big head about it. You know, I never thought it was that big a deal. But you get access, you get a certain amount of privilege. You can get away with certain things that you probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to get away with otherwise. And I fell victim to some of that. You know, I made plenty of mistakes along the way. I think now I look back at it, I've got a very healthy attitude about all of it now. But there was a point in time when I was in my late 30s and early 40s when I was especially rocking and rolling. You know, I was working 16, 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. I was traveling 70% of the time. I was away from home, and it was the entertainment business. So you know, you make mistakes, you do stupid shit, and I sure.
Well, we saw you in a few documentaries from like the early 90s or late 90s or something recently, and I mean, the glitz and the glamour and all that, but you were still smart and you were still talented, and you got through it. Like, I mean, it's interesting. I'll just say this really quick. So I'm in San Francisco. It's like somewhere in the 90s. I don't know where. I just had this visualization today that I remembered, and I have my girlfriends that were models back then to be my witness. I'm doing something in San Francisco. There's a bunch of girls and I doing it. I don't know if it's Chanel or even Marcus opening or something. I go to a bar that night. We get wasted. All of a sudden, all these wrestlers come in, and they're all professional wrestlers, right? And they're like, let's go to the party. And they're like, and I had the biggest room of all the girls. So they're like, let's go to her room. And I was like, just give me Coke. Like, that's all I wanted.
Bring the cocaine.
Yeah, just bring the cocaine. So I ended up having all these wrestlers there, and they're like, that, you know, the girls loved them. They were like, that's that person, that person, that person. And I'm like, where's the blow? Just give me the blow. And I'm like sitting there in my big Chanel glasses. I just want my cocaine. But like, I ended up talking to a couple of those guys, and they were like, you know, yeah, my body hurts and this and that.
There was no cocaine either. They didn't bring any.
Yeah. One of them brought crack and they had to get kicked out of the room. But anyways, like the moral of the story is that, like, you know, I know that a lot of these guys, like some of them, you know, their bodies getting injured, or there's a lot of addiction and partying.
I actually wanted to get into that because there is, I think now it's better, but there used to be a lot of substance abuse, a lot of alcoholism, and I can look at I could probably name 40 wrestlers that have either committed suicide or died from substance abuse related illnesses over the past 25 years. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, but you know, and Jennifer, I know that kind of thing went on. I'm not naive to it. I never, you know, cocaine was one thing that I was lucky to avoid. I dabbled, you know, it was the 80s in Chicago. Sure. I dabbled, but it was, you know, I don't know. I was always afraid of it. You know, even when I was doing it, I was afraid of it. And I don't know why. Maybe, you know, God was talking to me along the way. So while I sampled and I was an amateur, I never really got into it. You know, my vice was really only alcohol. It was alcohol, but I stayed away from a lot of the other stuff. But as a guy who's been in the wrestling business for 30 years, especially at the level I was at, I saw a lot of the people around me. It was really, it wasn't cocaine. It wasn't even crack. It wasn't heroin back then. It was prescription drugs.
Prescription pills. Yep.
That was the drug of choice with most of my peers. You know, it was a running joke, you know, starter kit. I don't know if you know what a starter kit is. It may not be relevant outside of wrestling, but a starter kit in professional wrestling was a Vike, 2 mini thins, and about 4 beers.
Yep.
And that was, I'm not lying, that was fun. I mean, it was. But I also saw what it did to people. Mm-hmm. Well, first thing that scared me about it was I found out that if you take aspirin, or if you, you know, Vicodin had acetaminophen in it. So if you take Vicodin, for example, and you're drinking alcohol, it's kind of like processing shards of glass through your liver.
Yep.
And then once I read about that, I'm like, okay, enough of that for me. Things got to be with me for a little bit. So I dabbled in it, but I was able to get out of it. And then after I got out of it or stayed away from it, made up my mind I wasn't going to do that, I was watching people around me that were really, really getting screwed up from it. Mm. Not so much outwardly, but I watched their personality change. People that are, I don't know, I'm not like you guys, I'm an expert on this stuff. I just know what I saw. And I saw a lot of people who, when I first got to know them before they got into, especially Vicodin and the opiates, they were like happy-go-lucky, positive people, fun to be around. And after 6 months or so of these guys drinking and, living off Vicodin, they were like gnarly, crabby, miserable, negative. They just weren't fun to be around.
Right.
Man, that's not good. But I saw a lot of somas was another one, muscle relaxers. I'd be sitting down some nights after a show talking to somebody that was on the show. I'm not going to name names. They sat down, we'd order dinner, having a great time, still full of adrenaline after the show. I'd be talking to the guy, and 30 seconds later, he'd like face plant right into a pile of mashed potatoes. It's like, what the hell?
Right.
But it was the alcohol and the soma kicking in.
Absolutely. Whew. Were you still in the industry when Chris Benoit committed suicide and killed his wife and son?
I think I was in a very brief sabbatical during that. I remember where I was. I was at GNC headquarters in Pittsburgh, actually, with Hulk Hogan. And we had just gone out we were just sitting at dinner with a group of executives from GNC because we were launching a line of Hulk Hogan nutritional supplements at GNC. And we were there to kind of consummate the deal and sign off on it. We'd been working on it for a while. And we're all sitting around, having dinner, and the news broke. And that kind of, not only did it, kill the deal, obviously, because the wrestling got a pretty bad rap after that. But, I had known Chris. Chris used to work for me for several years. So I'd gotten to know Chris pretty well. And I knew his wife, Nancy. She worked for me as well. So it was bizarre. It still is. It's hard to comprehend.
I mean, that was one of the guys you watch, and they say it was the steroids or this. I mean, it's depression, it's mental health. But yeah, it's one of the most bizarre stories ever. How did that shift the industry? Because it's interesting. You say you're with Hulk Hogan. I want to talk about Hulk because he's a dear friend of yours, and you guys got some cool stuff coming out. How did it affect the industry, and how did it affect you personally, Eric? Because probably more people in the wrestling industry than most, because you've worked with them all, whether it was WWE, WWF, WCW. You've worked with all these people at one time or another.
It confused me because the Chris Benoit that I knew or thought I knew was he was a gentle, polite, humble, non-assuming. He was shy. He didn't like being in a large crowd, which sounds kind of weird for a professional wrestler, but he was like the last guy in a lineup you would ever pick, to go off the rails, especially that bad. But, subsequently we found out, and I don't think Chris's issues were drugs as much as they were head trauma.
Yeah.
Chris used to do a move off the top rope where he would come down. He would do a flying headbutt on his opponent that was in the ring. That was what we call in the industry his finishing maneuver. And he took a lot of abuse on his skull. He had a big, thick neck, and he was built for it. Nobody realized the amount of damage was being done to his brain. And I think when they finally did the autopsy, they discovered that Chris had a brain that had deteriorated to the state of like an 80 or 90-year-old man. So there was a lot of brain damage there, and I think that probably affected a lot of things.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Jen.
You're really, yeah.
Well, I am, because you had said earlier, I found out it's fake. Wrestling's scripted,
it's not.
But I mean,
it's not
this
fake. And I want to reiterate.
It's
funny
I mean,
that
these guys are kicking each other's asses.
Well, I know, and like I didn't mean
Maybe
to
the
say
boss
that.
would explain it.
I feel like he wants me to say I apologize.
No. I want to hear
but
what
I
Eric
do
is.
know that, like.
How do you explain it when people say it's fake?
It's not fake. It's scripted, and that was the whole confusion for me back
Right.
then. But I know. So Tim's boxing. right? Recently, he's been boxing.
Yeah, Eric
twice
made a
day.
comment: if you're gonna box, don't box with your glasses on.
Wait, so he's boxing. He gets tennis elbow because he's hitting the thing. So he hasn't boxed in like a week and a half or so. So like, I can't even imagine jumping on like from somewhere. The damage that does. And I was friends with China because she was on our shows on the sober rehabs and stuff. And so like, I know, I'm aware. Like I'm aware, but I can't even imagine the body pains. And I mean, I would be hooked on all those pills too.
Yeah, it's, are the outcomes predetermined? Absolutely. But is the physicality real? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And look, it's a little bit, there's a little bit of, David Copperfield going on there. The art in professional wrestling is to be able to execute something physically that looks absolutely devastating, but isn't. But along the way, I would say 50 or 60% of the time, you're putting your body into situations and doing things that are taking an unbelievable amount of toll on your body. I'll give you an example. Rest his soul, a good friend of mine just passed away recently, Kevin Green, Hall of Famer in the NFL, played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah. He's a linebacker. Yep. He also wrestled for me for a while. Huh. One of the best athletes I've ever worked with, and one of the toughest people I've ever worked with. When Kevin was at the top of his game playing for the Steelers, I think he was getting like, I don't know. I don't want to quote it because I'll get it wrong and I'll hurt his credibility, but he was a sack leader in the Pittsburgh Steelers for a number of years. He was a legit badass. He decided he wanted to come in and wrestle. And, we put him into camp and we started training him. And after his first day, he came to me and said, "Brother, I don't know if I can do this." Here's a guy, a professional athlete, he's been playing football since he was probably 4, at the highest level in the NFL, and he had a hard time getting used to it. So it's physically very demanding.
I bet. Who are the top 3 people, class acts that you've worked with in the wrestling? And
well, there's a lot of them, Obviously, Hulk Hogan is still one of my dearest friends. There's a cat by the name of his nickname is the Cat, actually. But Ernest Miller is another very, very good friend of mine. He was a martial artist. He was also a football player, but he was primarily a martial artist at the highest level. I actually convinced him to get into professional wrestling because I knew he would do well, and he did very, very well. Still, to this day, one of my closest friends. Works really hard with the kids in his community in Atlanta. He's developing a show right now with A&E called Karate Kids. It's a reality show following these kids who are trying to find themselves in martial arts and developing self-esteem and self-respect and respect for others and all the other things that goes along with, good martial arts instruction. He is certainly up there. Diamond Dallas Page, another dear friend of mine, give you the shirt off his back,
Awesome.
There's a few of them, probably too many to name.
I have to jump back a little bit because it's been like ever since you mentioned it.
I know. Things to talk about too. We're going to keep Eric on for 4 hours.
He's like so excited. It's like, but I remember. Okay, so earlier you were talking about. I think you were in Philly, and across the street was your mentor.
I was in Pittsburgh. Yeah,
Pittsburgh. Okay, sorry, not Philly. In Pittsburgh. Who was that mentor, and what did how in what way did he affect your life?
Wow, that's a really good question, Jen. The fact that I'm living in Cody, Wyoming is because of this guy.
Wow.
His name was Bob. His real name was Bob Raciapi, but he was Italian, I think. But he went by Bob Racy. He shortened it. And Bob, when I moved to Pittsburgh, I think I was like 14. Bob must have been about 26. So he was about 12, 13 years older than me. Very successful young guy. My father, just to back up a little bit, my father became paralyzed when he was in his mid-20s, late 20s. He lost use of his hands and arms in the course of a brain surgery. The surgeon damaged some nerves in his spinal cord, whatever. I don't mean to make light of it. I just don't know the details.
Right.
And as a result of my dad loved us and he was a great father, but he wasn't capable of doing certain things with us. with me in particular. My dad used to love to hunt and fish before he lost his arms. He loved to hunt and fish. He was a very physical guy, grew up on a farm, outdoorsy, strong, tough guy. And then in his mid-20s or so, he couldn't even brush his own teeth or take care of himself in a ways. That upon mother, and that created a lot of frustration in my dad. It was back in the 60s, when men were men, and your wives, all they do is stay home and iron clothes and wash clothes and cook, and it was tough on my dad. He ended up being kind of a bitter guy as a result of it. I understand it now. I didn't when I was a kid, but and as a result of that, there was a lot of things I wasn't able to do as a young kid. Well, Bob Racy, my neighbor across the street, who became a mentor for me in so many ways, kind of took me under his wing, and he would take me hunting, and he would do a lot of things with me that my dad just couldn't do. My dad wanted to do them. He just couldn't do them. So that's how I kind of got to know Bob. Bob was the first person to get me involved in martial arts. If you want to follow this spider web all the way back to, how I ended up where I ended up, it was Bob's interest in Bob. He was in Vietnam. He got his black belt when he was overseas, and he came back, and he was teaching me martial arts at a very early age. And it's one of the reasons that I pursued it later on in life when I was in my 20s, is because of the introduction, which led me to Ninja Star Wars, which led me to Vern Gagne, which led me to Ted Turner, which led me here. Bob Racy told me all about this great little town called Cody, Wyoming, back in 1977. I was 22 years old. I had a credit card with a $200 credit limit and $60 in my wallet. And I jumped in my pickup truck and drove out to Cody, Wyoming to meet my friend Bob for the summer. We hung out here all summer, did all kinds of crazy,
amazing,
fun Cody stuff. But yeah, he was a big mentor for me. He was also an entrepreneur. He was a hustler in a good way, in a positive way. And I think part of who he nurtured it. It was already there in me, but he kind of turned up the volume on it.
It's interesting, wow, Eric, because, great question, Jen. One of the best questions you've asked. That's because what you do, and I don't know with how many people, but you mentor and guide and direct people because you do it with me. And the way our paths crossed came together, you've become a friend and a mentor to me in many aspects of my life. You got her crying.
Yeah.
You got her crying.
A beautiful story, because you never know. It's like that. It's that moment. It's that one thing that changes everything.
You are so right. And that reality is really just beginning to dawn on me over the last 6 months or a year. And it's manifested because as a part of what, one of the things that I do this podcast, and I'm involved on a platform on Patreon called adfreeshows.com. It's a subscription member kind of thing. And one of the things I do to promote that, once every couple months is you sign up today, you get a phone call from Aaron Bischoff. And when I started doing these about 4 or 6 months ago, I'm calling people up, thinking they just want to ask a couple questions or whatever, but they don't. They tell you their story, and they tell you, in my case, they tell me how much wrestling has meant to them. I'm going to give you 2 quick examples. I promise I won't.
That's okay. Go ahead.
But there's a young lady by the name of Amanda Webster, who I met 4 years ago. I was at a Comic-Con with Hulk Hogan, and we were up on stage. We were doing a, what do they call them? Not a seminar, but it's basically a question and answer thing for people at Comic-Cons. And this young lady, Amanda, I didn't know her at the time. She stood up in the back, and she's telling me a story. She said, and I'm going to paraphrase it all, but basically she grew up, her father worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Family was struggling. For whatever reason, her father's schedule, the only time that they had together was on Monday nights. It was the only night that her father didn't work. And they would sit and watch Monday Nitro, my show on TNT. So she grew up kind of watching me, and her father had passed away. Her mother had passed away. She didn't really have any brothers or sisters. She didn't really have much family. So she tells me this story in front of, probably 1,500 people at this Q&A. And it touched me. a lot, but I kept it together. And then about 4 or 5 days later, or a week later, whatever it was, doesn't matter. This girl, Amanda, realized that my wife, Lori, taught a class at the same college that Amanda took classes at.
Wow.
So Amanda picked up the phone and tracked my wife down, got her phone number through the school, called my wife. No, she emailed her first and then called her and basically said, hey, I'm getting married. Now I'm going to cry. She said, bear with me. This one always gets me. I've told this story a dozen times. It still gets me. She basically said, hey, my father passed away and I don't have anybody else. I'm getting married. You know the rest. You think Eric would walk me down the aisle?
Wow.
And I looked at Lori and I said, well, when is she getting married? She said, in a month. I said, where is she getting married? She said, Minneapolis. I said, fuck yeah, let's go.
That's awesome.
And now, we're close friends now, and you hear, and that's just one. That's a big one. But I hear if it doesn't happen at least 6 times or 8 times a month, I'm shocked. And they're always such poignant, powerful stories. It's made me realize that you do, when you're in the public eye, even on a limited basis like I am now. I'm not on national television anymore. I'm doing a podcast and things like that. But man, you can really touch people in either a very positive way or a very negative way, depending on your outlook on life.
So you're absolutely right. And
I'm all stuffed up.
I'm going to jump to it, but
ball hysterically.
Hey, thanks for sharing that. But I'll fast forward to a couple of years ago. We are in Florida at the Hard Rock Casino. I fly in with my son Maxwell. You're there. Not only that, and we had become friends due to Dope Man and all that, which I'll hit on. But the time you spent with Max and I, and it was one of these. Eric kind of moderated it, and it's Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan. But we got to going back and, not just say hi. We got to talk with Ric Flair and hang out with him and some other people, and then Hulk Hogan. But I have a picture of myself, Max, my son, Eric, Hulk Hogan, and Ric Flair. And that's one of the pictures I cherish the most because I'm there with some icons I got to grow up with. And here you're a friend of mine. You produced my documentary on A&E, Dope Man, and it's crazy how all this just came together and where we're at now. Fucking life's pretty cool when you sit back and look at it,
It's amazing, and that's one of the things, it's not like I grew up, dreading getting older. But it's always in your mind, especially when you get into your 30s and 40s. For me, I think I started actually feeling like, wow, I'm actually getting older. I'm 45. It's really happening. The shit is really happening. And then you get into your 50s, and then I was like, wow. But one of the things I enjoy about getting older is just kind of being able to step back, kind of like a macro view of life. And you realize that all those little dots that you've established throughout your life oftentimes come back around. They come back around in a different way. People are in different situations and things like that. But man, the world has gotten so much smaller for me over the years in a really positive way, because I've got people coming into my life now that, I knew them 15, 20, 30 years ago casually. And now I'm doing business with them, or now they're just really close friends, or I'm looking forward to going and visit them somewhere. I kind of dig that.
It's pretty cool. Every time Jenn and I drive down whatever highway, I'm like, oh, there's a hotel, Eric Bischoff. And I stared at when we came out and you took me to go meet with Tom Beers, and we got to spend, a couple hours, his lot alone, going able to experience that and sit down with Tom and a couple of his team. Those are things that are burning my head, Eric, that I'll never forget. They're not many people get to do the things I've done just with you in the past 4 or 5 years. And we produced a vast documentary, but some of the places and people you've introduced me to, I thank you, because they're memories I'll have for the rest of my life. Memories I enjoy, and I enjoy our phone calls and our friendship and everything else. And we need to get together. That's all there is. It's been too long.
Isn't it? I mean, thank you for saying that, by the way. It makes me feel good. But it also reminds me, and you guys know this, you live this. I try to live it and be more aware. But, man, it's those moments. You don't realize that you're in the moment that's going to become so important to you a year or 5 years or 10 years. So whenever I get into a new situation or meet somebody new, under any circumstance, I really try to put a valuation on it, or at least recognize the value of it is a better way to say that. Recognize the value of that, because for so much of my life, I've been so busy and I've run so hard that, you run through people and you run through opportunities and you run through these moments and you don't take time to realize, well, this is kind of a big damn deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to tell Tim, I'll be like, babe, I need you to take this in right now. Like, I need you to stop for a second and try to take what's going on, whatever situation it is, in. Take a breath into this. I feel that, I'm thinking about that story that you're talking about where you were able to walk that young lady down the aisle, that not only did you allowed people like us, the audience, feel like we were cheering for something in the midst of all the chaos that's going on in our lives, especially people that came from chaotic, childhoods. And we cheered and we believed in that one moment that was reality.
Well, I mean, that's why movies work and why television works. And if it's done well, you forget that what you're watching isn't real.
Yeah.
And the emotions that you're feeling, whether it's suspense or fear or, pleasure or apprehension, whatever the emotions are that are being generated by whatever it is you're watching, if they're done well enough, you forget, you get sucked into it, and you're living in that moment as if it was real. Yeah. And that's the mark of good television or good movies. Oftentimes I watch television now and I want to throw myself off the roof.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, but you made us all believe that we could be heroes too.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? We practice the move or whatever it was. And that's just such a gift. I was thinking about that.
I can remember
translating into acting too, because that's what I was able and have been able to do acting wise, And,
but all of my boys, Nick, Max, Tanner, all had the World Wrestling Federation or whatever it was, WWW, the characters and everything. I mean, they lived for that shit because that's what I did. We watched Nitro and we'd watch Raw and this and
2003, you stop and then you start doing something else. That's where we ended earlier before we started.
Yeah, but
then you went over to work with Vince McMahon.
Oh yeah, I was 18 years ago now.
Yeah.
But yeah, Vince McMahon hired me as an on-camera talent. I became the general manager, on-camera figurehead of Monday Night Raw, and I did that for about 5 years.
Amazing. So I want to jump ahead though. If we can talk about this, because we're getting close to having a wind down. You and Hulk Hogan had been working on something for a while, and it's coming to fruition now. Are you able to talk about that?
I can talk about the things that have been published already and are out there in the public domain. I can't get into too much detail, but we've been working on a movie for Netflix for quite some time. I don't even want to think about how long because it takes the fun out of it. But we've been working on it for a while. It's a life story of Hulk Hogan, and it's being directed by Todd Phillips, who directed The Joker, the most recent one.
Yeah.
It was written by a gentleman by the name of Scott Silver, who was the co-writer of The Joker. And Chris Hemsworth is attached to play Hulk Hogan. And it's
going to be so crazy.
I mean, how badass is that?
So crazy.
And I know you'd been working on this a long time. And people don't understand, you don't just go out And hey, we put together, I can't believe how long some of these things take to go from inception to finally getting in front of people's eyes.
It's ridiculous. Now, COVID has made it even worse, obviously. I mean, right now we're just sitting here. Everybody's ready to go. Script's done. Everything's ready to go. But it's a big movie. It's a very, very, very big movie. One of the bigger ones Netflix has done. But it's going to require, not dozens of extras, not hundreds of extras, thousands of extras on set.
Wow. In
big arenas. And until, this COVID thing, gets under control, nobody's really making movies right now. And if they are, they're different kinds of movies. Margins have gotten crushed so badly, unless you're, if you're Game of Thrones or, some other really high budget streaming type fiction format. Yeah, you can still make money doing that. But for the types of television that I've been producing for about 15 years, the margins are so slim now. And the market for television has just become decimated. So it's like, I'll try something else. So I jumped into movie side, and then COVID hit. So I mean, it's like, man, I can't get away from this gestation period.
But you've had something pretty badass in the interim called 83 Weeks. Tell us about 83 Weeks.
Yeah, 83 Weeks is a weekly podcast. It drops 6 o'clock Monday mornings, wherever you get your favorite podcast. It's essentially a weekly podcast about they call it the Monday Night Wars, when WCW and WWF were going head to head, and probably what most people would consider the golden era.
Sure.
At least in this lifetime of professional wrestling. The competition was kind of like Coke and Pepsi in a way. The competition got so hot that on any given Monday night, there was anywhere between 8 and 10 million people watching one or both of those shows.
I was one of them.
Yeah. So it was a really interesting time. A lot of things changed. A lot of things happened. A lot of great stories. And we kind of cover that every week.
Now, that's a lot of millions. Like 83 to 100 million, you said?
No, I'm giving you between 8 to 10 people watching.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's still a lot
How
of people.
did you and Conrad, your co-host, come together to host 83 Weeks?
That's an episode all by itself. But I had actually met Conrad through another friend of mine who I knew through professional wrestling. Conrad had been doing a podcast with Ric Flair and with my other buddy, Bruce Pritchard. And Bruce said, hey, you should talk to Conrad, see if he's interested in doing something with you. And if you're interested in doing something with him, take each other's temperatures. And we did. And here we are 2 years later.
And it's blowing up. I mean, you guys have got a very successful podcast going.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do probably, I don't know, I haven't looked at it lately, but anywhere from about 115 to 150,000 downloads a week. So it's pretty good.
Damn
That's
straight.
Amazing. That's unbelievable.
Where did 83 Weeks come from? Where did you come up with that name?
I didn't come up with it. Somebody else did, but it kind of represents during that Monday Night War era when WWF and WCW were going head to head. We defeated WWF 83 straight weeks.
That's so awesome.
That's a best branding I've ever seen. So
he talks about this all the time. By the way, whenever your name comes up, he tells me the same exact story over and over again. And I love it.
It's short, it's simple. The logos are badass. And
I do want to say this, though. I want to tell you with all sincerity, my husband looks to you as a mentor. And I want to thank you for you being that mentor to him. And it's definitely made a huge impact.
And I appreciate it, Eric.
You have.
Wow. It means a lot to me, especially coming from two people that have dedicated themselves to helping other people. So that's kind of like a big damn deal to me. So thank you.
Yeah, no, and it's just crazy how it works. And the good thing is, I can call you and just bounce. You always give me the time. You listen to my fucking lunatic ideas, and this is great. Tim, are you sure you're not smoking crack again? But no, and I cherish that, and I thank you. And Man, we could talk for 3 more hours.
I know
here.
we kind of can. Like, I'm still blown away about the movie though. Like, I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited about this movie for you.
So
and for us.
what's 2021 looking like, Eric? I mean, what's on your radar? Do you have anything you can talk about or not, or just kind of going day by day with the way the wind blows?
You know, I'm kind of taking it one day. Obviously, the 83 Weeks podcast is something I enjoy doing. The ad-free shows platform, we built that up. We're now, I don't know if you know anything about Patreon, but there's somewhere around 2,000 or 3,000 different shows on the Patreon platform. They generate tens of millions of dollars a year. We're number 56 in terms of revenue,
Man,
of all those shows. So we should do well over $1 million this year in subscriptions.
Good for you.
Could you just touch me so I can turn to gold? Because everything you touch turns to gold.
Well, I got to be honest with you. That was tough. It's part of it. I worked pretty hard to contribute to make sure that I'm pulling my own weight, but that wasn't my idea. I'm just fortunate enough to be along for the ride.
Conrad's a mover and a shaker in his own realm. So
he's an amazing young man. He's 37 years old. He's owned his own mortgage company for I don't know how long. He's first time I went to his house, I was kind of okay. He's a wrestling fan. He wants to interview me, and this was before the podcast. So I pull up to his house, and he's got this big, beautiful mansion in Huntsville, Alabama. And I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of a big deal. And then I go out to his garage, and he's got a Rolls Royce parked next to his Mercedes Maybach. Wow. Oh, and he's got another Mercedes out in the driveway. Oh, but his daily driver is the Beamer MX-5. And I'm going, wow, oh, what do you do, dude? So he's really a mortgage broker who happens to be a huge wrestling fan and loves podcasts.
That's awesome.
I'm working with Conrad on the mortgage side. I've been working with him for about a year, so I'm just now starting to really get my feet in the water, so to speak, and move some mortgages with him and having a blast doing it. Good, and just taking one day at a time, brother.
Amen.
Wait, one more question I have. What do you think that guy that sat in the bus with you, flicking you?
With the metal.
Or the metal bang, 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 bang guy. I wonder what he says now. Do you think he's still, do you think that's his story?
Do I think he sits at home and tells his grandkids, hey, that guy beat my ass one day?
Oh, we love it. I
wonder what he would say now.
He would lie about that and not tell anybody. Hey, there's the guy that beat my ass because I was being a bully to him. I doubt it. I doubt it. Eric, how can people find you if they want to try to, obviously they can go download on any podcast platform 83 Weeks to listen to your show. Please subscribe to it. Check it out. But if people want to try to follow you, where can they follow you, contact you?
I spend a little bit of time on Instagram, but I'm kind of a high-tech redneck and haven't gotten very good at it yet. On Instagram, it's The Real Aaron Bischoff because there's a couple fake ones out there. But most of the time I'm on Twitter, and that's @ebischoff.
All right, good stuff.
I can't even tell you. I'm so geeked out right now. Like just talking to you, you made me cry a couple times today. You made me laugh.
Badass podcast.
You're the hustler I want to be like. You are just a badass, amazing. I thank you for doing our show. I'm just in awe.
Yeah, Eric, we want to
legend.
Thank you. Yeah, you are definitely a legend. We want to thank you for coming on the Tim and Jen show. I thank you for your friendship, your support over the years, and I promise that we are coming to visit Cody, Wyoming once it gets a little warmer.
Well, you make your way out here, and as soon as COVID gives us a little bit of a break, Lori and I will come out to LA. Our daughter lives in Marina Del Rey. We'll visit her. Girl. And the five of us will go out for dinner some night.
Please. We just got our second vaccine last week, so boop, boop. All right.
I want to thank everyone.
Thank everyone for listening. Lux Media. If anyone is struggling, go to dopetohope.com or please call us directly at 844-611-HOPE. Again, we want to thank Eric. We want to thank Lux Media. Tim Ryan, Jennifer Jimenez Ryan signing off. We'll talk to you next week. We want to talk to you about Clean Cause, better caffeine. What's in the can? Our organic, sparkling Herba Mate is a premium pick-me-up that won't let you down. Every can of Clean Cause contains 160 milligrams of better caffeine, and each sip supports recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. 50% of the profits go to assist people into sober living. Check out cleancause.com.
Hope. At Rosecrans, it's more than a wish. Hope has power. As the proven behavioral health leader in the Midwest, no other program offers our depth of experience and hope here at Rosecrans. And when someone you love struggles with substance abuse and mental illness, hope plays an important part in recovery. Life's got bigger plans for you. We should know. We're the most trusted name in treatment and the best choice for those who dare to hope. Visit us at rosecrans.org. Life's waiting.
Seaside Palm Beach is an executive luxury addiction treatment center located in Palm Beach, Florida. Our private clients come from all over the world, including business executives, professional athletes, celebrities, and more. Seaside Palm Beach offers first-class amenities and high-end accommodations, including a gourmet culinary experience, ocean views, pet-friendly facilities, and access to cell phones and laptops during your stay. If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction, please call us at 877-959-5053. Again, that number is 877-959-5053.
Now, glutathione is a big word, but it's the body's own master antioxidant. So it's a scavenger for free radicals, for bacteria, and what's relevant now, viruses. This is new to the marketplace. There's no other product on the market that has the ingredient NACET.
And basically NACET increases the production of that glutathione that is in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system and keep it strong. Elevated sense of well-being. Supports muscle strength and endurance. Cognitive function. Powerful liver support. Energy, helps blood sugar regulation, superior bioavailability of key ingredients.
One of your best defenses against COVID is a strong immune system. Taking GSH Plus as a daily supplement does all that. And now we have the product out on the marketplace.